Donovan Hayes stood before a pane of glass 40 stories above the ground, but he wasn't admiring the view, he was studying the reflection. The sharp lines of his suit, the determined set of his jaw, the glint of ambition in his eyes. This was the image he had meticulously crafted. As the CEO of Apex Designs, he didn't just build skyscrapers, he built monuments to flawless, minimalist perfection. His latest, the Ethel, was his masterpiece, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that had won every architectural award imaginable. There was just one problem. The people inside hated it. The Ethel was a paradox. On paper, it was perfect. Its energy efficiency was unparalleled, its layout was mathematically optimized for workflow, and its aesthetic was breathtakingly modern. Yet productivity within its walls had plummeted. Employee turnover was at an all-time high for the massive tech firm that leased the building. They called it the Cathedral of Silence. It was beautiful, but it was cold. It was a perfect building with no soul. Today, Donovan was facing the furious board of that tech firm in his main conference room. "Your building is a failure, Mr. Hayes," the lead board member, a severe woman named Evelyn, stated flatly. "My people feel isolated. They feel watched. The design is oppressive. We are considering breaking our lease." Donovan's smile was a thin, polished veneer. "Evelyn, with all due respect, my designs are not based on feelings, they're based on data. The Ethel is the most efficient workspace in the country. Perhaps your team simply isn't adapting." As he spoke, the conference room door opened slightly. An old janitor, his back stooped with age, pushed a cleaning cart into the room, believing it to be empty. He wore a simple gray uniform, and his hands, gnarled from years of work, moved with a slow, steady rhythm. He began quietly emptying the wastebasket in the corner, trying to be invisible. Evelyn scoffed. "Data? My best programmers are taking sick days because the stark white walls give them migraines. Your perfect building is costing me millions." Donovan's frustration, simmering for weeks, finally boiled over. He needed to reassert control, to make a point. His eyes landed on the old janitor, a perfect symbol of the insignificant analog world he had transcended. In a move of staggering arrogance, he pointed directly at the man. "Do you see him?" he asked the room, his voice sharp with condescension. "He probably spends more time in this building than anyone. He sees the smudges, the scuffs, the reality of the space." He then turned his full, intimidating attention to the janitor, who had frozen, his hand hovering over the trash can. "You! Tell me your name." "Samuel, sir." The old man's voice was a quiet, low rumble. "Well, Samuel," Donovan said, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, "you hear these complaints. You, a man who understands a building from the ground up. If you can walk through this oppressive masterpiece of mine and find a single, tangible solution to this company's feelings problem, a solution my team of world-class architects has missed, I will personally give you the deed to the corner office on the top floor." A wave of shocked, uncomfortable silence swept through the room. It was a grotesque, impossible challenge. He was using a powerless man as a prop to humiliate his client. He expected Samuel to stammer an apology and flee. But he didn't. Samuel straightened his back, the stoop in his shoulders seeming to lessen. He met Donovan's gaze, and his eyes, clear and deeply intelligent, held not a trace of fear. "I do not want an office, Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice steady and resonant, "but I will walk your building. because it seems you have designed a perfect house, but you have forgotten to design a home. The room, filled with powerful executives and cutting-edge thinkers, went utterly still. Donovan Hayes, the visionary architect, had just been handed a lesson in design from a man holding a dustpan, and for the first time in his life, he had no blueprint for what to do next.
Donovan Hayes was not born into a world of clean lines and polished marble. His kingdom was built on a foundation of rust and neglect. He grew up in a sprawling, poorly planned housing project in Detroit, a concrete labyrinth where hallways led to dead ends, and the walls were so thin you could hear your neighbor's heartbreaks. His childhood home was a testament to bad design. It wasn't just ugly, it was dehumanizing. It was a space that told you every single day that you were an afterthought. That building became the villain of his origin story. He swore he would spend his life creating the opposite, spaces of order, logic, and breathtaking, undeniable perfection. He didn't want to build buildings, he wanted to build statements. Statements that declared that chaos could be conquered, that ugliness could be erased. He clawed his way into a top architecture program fueled by a rage that burned hotter than any ambition. He outworked everyone. While his peers were studying famous architects, he was studying ergonomics, efficiency metrics, and the psychological impact of spatial design. He saw people not as individuals, but as a collective variable to be managed. His genius was in creating systems, not sanctuaries. When he founded Apex Designs, his philosophy was simple and ruthless. Form follows function, and emotion has no function. He designed buildings like he wrote code, clean, efficient, and free of sentimental clutter. He used stark whites, polished concrete, and vast expanses of glass. His designs were celebrated on the covers of magazines. They were hailed as the future. But his pursuit of perfection had hollowed him out. He lived in a minimalist penthouse that looked more like a gallery than a home. He had no family, few friends, and a team of employees who respected his genius but feared his cold, data-driven approach to everything. He had successfully built a world without the chaos of his childhood, but it was also a world without warmth, without connection, without a soul. The Eiffel was to be his legacy, the ultimate expression of his philosophy. It was a perfect machine for working. Every desk was positioned for optimal light. Every hallway was designed for the most efficient flow of foot traffic. The AI-controlled climate system maintained a constant, unwavering temperature. He had designed away every possible human imperfection. So when the complaints started rolling in, complaints of isolation, headaches, a lack of creative energy, he couldn't process them. The data was perfect. The building was perfect. The flaw, therefore, had to be with the people. They were messy, illogical, and inefficient. They were failing his building. That's why he'd lashed out at Samuel. The old janitor with his worn uniform and simple tools was a ghost from the world Donovan had tried to erase. Samuel represented the random, the imperfect, the human element that he had worked so hard to design out of existence. His cruel challenge was a defense mechanism. By mocking Samuel, he was mocking the messy, emotional world that was now threatening to invalidate his life's work. But as Samuel stood before him, his quiet dignity unshaken, Donovan felt an old, forgotten memory surface. His mother, standing in their cramped kitchen, arranging a single plastic flower in a glass on the windowsill. "It's not much," she'd told him, but every room needs something that's just there to be beautiful. He had dismissed it as foolishness then. Now, standing in his monument to function, he felt the chilling possibility that he had been wrong about everything.
Samuel's hands knew the story of every building he had ever cleaned. They knew the worn patches on the carpets where people paced when they were worried, the smudges on the glass where they leaned to dream, and the nicks on the door frames from years of hurried entries and exits. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a silent archivist of human life. He hadn't always planned to push a broom. In his youth, he had a dream and a scholarship to the architecture program at Howard University. He had a gift for it. He didn't just see lines and angles, he saw how people would live within them. He filled notebooks with sketches of community centers with sunlit reading nooks, and homes with kitchens designed for laughter, not just efficiency. But life, as it often does, had a different blueprint. His father, a construction worker, had a bad fall, and the medical bills began to pile up. Samuel, the eldest son, made a choice. He dropped out of school and took a job at a factory to support his family. The scholarship vanished, and the dream was packed away like his old notebooks in a dusty box in the back of a closet. He never became an architect, but he never stopped seeing the world through an architect's eyes. He took jobs as a maintenance man, a groundskeeper, and for the last 20 years, a janitor. In every building, he saw the design flaws the architects had missed. He saw the break rooms with no natural light that drained the spirit. The grand lobbies that were so intimidating no one ever lingered. The long, straight hallways that felt like tunnels, encouraging people to hurry past each other without a word. He observed the Ethel from the day its foundation was poured. He saw the beauty of its design, but he also saw its arrogance. It was a building designed for an idea of a person, not a real one. It was a monument to its creator, not a home for its inhabitants. He saw the employees when they first moved in, full of excitement. Then he watched as week by week the energy changed. He saw the small things. People started eating lunch at their desks instead of in the sterile, echoing cafeteria. They put up pictures and plants to create a small pocket of warmth in their minimalist white cubicles, only to have them removed by management for violating the building's clean aesthetic policy. They walked the long, silent hallways with their heads down, their footsteps echoing a lonely rhythm. Donovan Hayes had designed a building that prevented community. It was a masterpiece of isolation. When Samuel was thrust into the spotlight of that conference room, he wasn't afraid. He had spent a lifetime in the shadows, observing. He understood the building's sickness better than anyone. It wasn't a technical problem, it was a human one. The CEO's challenge, meant as an insult, felt like something else to Samuel. A door creaking open after 40 years. A chance, however small, to finally use the knowledge he had been forced to carry in silence. He wasn't thinking about winning an office. He was thinking about all the people walking those lonely hallways. He was thinking about how to fix a building that had forgotten how to breathe. He accepted the challenge not for himself, but for them. It was time to show the man who designed the house what it takes to build a home.
The next morning, Donovan, flanked by two of his top architects, met Samuel in the vast white lobby of the Ethel. The architects, a man and a woman in sharp black attire, held tablets and laser measures. They looked at Samuel, with his simple uniform and worn-out shoes, as if he were a curious artifact.
"The schematics are ready for your review, Mr. Samuel," the female architect said, her voice dripping with professional condescension. Samuel shook his head gently. "I don't need to see the plans. The plans are the problem. I need to walk the building, and I need to talk to the people." Donovan's jaw tightened. This was not the data-driven analysis he expected, but he had made a public promise. "Fine. Lead the way." For the next 4 hours, Samuel gave them a tour of their own creation, but through his eyes. He didn't talk about structural integrity or energy efficiency. He talked about human nature. He took them to a long, perfectly straight hallway connecting 2 major departments. "This is what I call a human runway," he said. "It's too long and too exposed. No one wants to be the center of attention for that long. So people hurry. They don't stop to talk. They don't collaborate. You've designed a path, but you've prevented a connection." He led them to the cafeteria, a cavernous room with polished concrete floors and minimalist tables spaced exactly 10 feet apart. The acoustics were so perfect that a dropped fork echoed like a gunshot. "Look," he said, pointing to the empty tables. "You gave them space, but you didn't give them comfort. This room is an echo chamber. It's too loud for a private conversation and too empty for a comfortable one. That's why they eat at their desks. They're searching for privacy, for a little piece of territory that feels like their own." He took them to the main workspace, an open-plan floor where hundreds of employees sat in stark white cubicles under the cold blue-white glare of powerful LED lights. "This lighting is designed for perfect visibility," one of the architects stated defensively. "It's designed for a machine, but people aren't machines. This light is harsh. It's relentless. It feels like an interrogation. It denies the natural rhythm of the day. People need warmth. They need shadow. It's why they're getting headaches. They're trying to work in a laboratory, not an office." At the end of the tour, they stood back in the lobby. The architects looked bewildered, their technological certainties shaken by these simple human observations. "So what's your grand solution?" Donovan asked, his skepticism still a palpable force. "Are you suggesting we tear the building down and start again?" "No, sir," Samuel said calmly. "You don't need to tear it down. You just need to let it breathe." He pulled a crumpled piece of paper and a pencil from his pocket. He began to sketch. His hand, though gnarled, moved with a surprising, fluid grace. He didn't draw new walls. He drew changes. Here, in the long hallway, you break up the sightline. You add large potted plants, maybe a few benches. Create small alcoves where a conversation can happen naturally. In the cafeteria, you lower some of the lights, add acoustic panels that look like art, and bring in warmer wooden tables of different sizes. Create zones, a quiet corner for someone who wants to be alone, a large table for a team that wants to eat together. And in the main office, give them control. Install desk lamps with warmer, adjustable bulbs. Let them have a plant on their desk. Don't fight their need for a little piece of home. Help them create it. He finished sketching and held up the paper. It wasn't a technical blueprint. It was a recipe for humanity. The architects stared at the simple drawing, then at each other. It was all so simple. It was so simple they had never even considered it. Donovan looked at the sketch, then at the old man who had drawn it. For the first time, he saw not a janitor, but a designer, an architect of the human spirit. The silence that followed was the sound of a world recalibrating.
Donovan stood in the conference room, staring at Samuel's simple sketch. His architects were murmuring, a defensive buzz filling the air. "With all due respect, Donovan," one of them said, "adding a few potted plants isn't going to fix a multi-million-dollar productivity problem. It's anecdotal. It's not data." "Isn't it?" Donovan said, his voice quiet, thoughtful. He was looking at the faces of his team, seeing for the first time a reflection of his own rigid thinking. 100 people getting migraines isn't anecdotal. An empty cafeteria isn't a feeling, it's a fact. We've been trying to solve a human problem with a mathematical solution. Maybe we've been using the wrong kind of math. He made a decision. It was a risk. A move that went against every data-driven instinct he had. We're going to run a test. We will take one floor, the 5th floor, and we will implement every one of Samuel's suggestions, exactly as he described. The architects looked horrified, but they complied. For 1 week, the 5th floor was transformed. Large ficus trees were brought in to break up the long hallways, creating natural-feeling nooks. The harsh overhead lights were dimmed, and warm-toned desk lamps were placed on every desk. The section of the cafeteria on that floor was cordoned off and redesigned with wooden tables, soft acoustic panels, and lower, warmer lighting. The company's clean aesthetic policy was suspended for that floor, and employees were encouraged to bring in photos and personal items. Samuel oversaw the entire process, not like a supervisor, but like a gardener tending to his soil. He spoke with the workers, listening to their feedback, adjusting the placement of a chair here, a plant there. The results were not just positive, they were explosive. By the end of the first week, reported headaches on the 5th floor had dropped by 90%. Use of the redesigned cafeteria section tripled. But the most stunning metric was collaboration. The company's internal messaging system showed a 40% increase in cross-departmental projects initiated by employees on the 5th floor. People were stopping in the hallways to talk. They were gathering in the cafeteria for impromptu meetings. The floor was alive. It had a buzz, a warmth, a hum. The tech firm's board was brought in to see the results. As Evelyn, the severe board member, walked through the transformed floor, her stern expression slowly melted away. She saw her employees smiling. She heard the low, energetic murmur of conversation. She saw people collaborating in the very spaces they had once fled. She turned to Donovan, her eyes wide with a new kind of respect. "What is this?" Donovan looked across the room and saw Samuel quietly watering a plant in a corner. Just another janitor doing his job. He felt a profound, humbling wave wash over him. His masterpiece, his monument to perfection, had been saved by a handful of potted plants and the wisdom of a man he had tried to humiliate. He walked over to Evelyn, but he spoke loudly enough for his entire team to hear. "This," he said, his voice clear and steady, "is what happens when you stop designing for the building and you start designing for the people inside it. I was wrong. My data was wrong. My entire philosophy was wrong." Then he turned and walked directly to Samuel. In front of the board, in front of his own architects, he extended his hand. "Samuel," he said, his voice thick with an emotion no one had ever heard from him before, "I am sorry. You have more architectural wisdom in your little finger than my entire firm has in this whole tower. I made you a promise. Your office is waiting." Samuel looked at Donovan's outstretched hand, then at the faces of the employees on the 5th floor who were now watching, a silent, appreciative audience. He shook Donovan's hand, a firm, steady grip. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice full of a quiet grace, "I thank you for the offer, but I don't belong in a corner office. My work is down here, on the ground." Donovan nodded, a slow, understanding smile forming on his face. He had expected that. "You're right. A corner office is too small for you, which is why I'm not offering you an office. I'm offering you a department." The next week, Apex Designs announced the formation of a new, revolutionary division, the Department of Human-Centered Design. Its mission was not to design buildings, but to design the experience within them. It was a department dedicated to studying the intersection of space, psychology, and community. Its staff would be composed not just of architects, but of sociologists, artists, and community leaders. And its director, with an office that had a direct view of the entire city from the ground up, was Samuel. He accepted. He finally unearthed his old notebooks, the ones filled with sketches of sunlit reading nooks and community spaces, and brought them to his new desk. His dreams, dormant for 40 years, had finally found a home. The Athol was transformed, floor by floor, following Samuel's blueprint of humanity. The company's philosophy changed from the top down. Donovan Hayes, the cold architect of perfection, became a champion for a new kind of design, one that was messy, warm, and wonderfully, beautifully human. He learned to see his buildings not as monuments to himself, but as homes for the people within them. His partnership with Samuel became the stuff of industry legend, the CEO who learned to see, and the janitor who taught him how. Donovan never forgot the lesson he learned that day. He had built his empire to escape the memory of a poorly designed building, only to learn that the most flawed design of all was a life built without a human heart.
So here is the lesson. True vision isn't about looking down from the top floor. It's about understanding the world from the ground up. The person you're most likely to overlook might be the only one who can see what you're missing. Their title doesn't define their wisdom. If this story reminded you to look for the hidden genius in the people around you, the ones who work in the quiet corners of the world, then share this message. Because the most brilliant designs aren't made of glass and steel. They're made of dignity, respect, and a deep understanding of the human soul.